In this video, we're going to be looking at the different operators that are available to us in C#. Now, I already went ahead and created a project and I call it C# operators. Once again, try to avoid any special characters when naming your projects and solutions. And so I just use the word sharp instead of the special character, which looks like a number sign, right? So C# operators, and I already took the liberty of kind of writing in some things in the main function. So you can pause the video, try and create the project yourself and put in these comments, and then you can resume when you are done. Now, operators are symbols that are used to perform, well, literal operations, all right? So in any programming language, you have access to these operators when you want to do things like math, and, well, you have other categories where they allow you to do things like comparisons. But for this introduction to operators, we're just going to be dealing with the ones that are probably more mathematical and we need to know, if nothing else. So let's start off with the basic assignment operator. So we have used this already in previous examples, and that is used when we want to give some variable a value. So if I have a variable, it's int num, then I want num to have the value of 5, then I'm going to say num, you are assigned the value 5. So that's really what that is. It's really an assignment. So one equal sign by itself is really seen as an assignment. All right, so we're putting the value of 5 inside of our variable. We're assigning the value of 5 to our variable num. All right, so that's the basic and very easy one. And we can always just write a console.writeLine just to prove that it works. So I'm just going to say assigned value to variable. All right, and then I'm going to use my interpolation. So we should know how to concatenate string already. So since I have this one available to me, this is the one that you're going to see me use more frequently than not. Otherwise, use the one that your language or your .NET framework supports. So once again, we use this to assign a value to a variable. It can be multiple variables with multiple assignments. It can be a static value. So static means that I have coded it in, meaning I put 5. So this will never change unless I come back to this screen and change this text from 5 to 10. That's the only way this will change. But then that's what makes it static. Whereas when we're assigning values from the user input, it makes it more dynamic. But that principle of assigning doesn't change. All right. Now let's move on to the arithmetic operators. So for arithmetic operators, they're usually used to perform mathematical operations. So I'm going to define two variables right now, int x, and then I'm going to show you that you can actually do a declaration and assignment in one line. So I can say int x is equal to 5 and int y is equal to 10 right there. So instead of splitting it in two lines, I could just say int whatever variable is equal to whatever value I want and do that in one line. So that's another way you can do your assignment, right? But for this section, I want us to do some math. So I'm going to go through different examples and we're going to print to screen the different outcomes of the math that we're doing with these. So I'm going to say console.writeLine is equal to, and then for each line, I'm going to use my interpolation. So I'm going to say $, open and close quotation marks. And then I'm going to start off with addition, but we're going to go through the different examples. Addition, and then I am showing the result of an addition operation between x and y. So to add x and y, we're literally going to use the plus sign. So remember, the plus sign can be used for concatenation reasons also, but it's a form of what we call polymorphism, where the plus sign has multiple purposes. The plus sign is saying here that I'm adding two numbers, so do some math. Whereas in the context of a string, when you say block of string plus string variable, it's saying I'm adding two strings. So technically it's the same addition, but the outcome is going to be different because we don't expect to see 5 510 at the end of this operation, we expect to see 15. Whereas if they were strings, then you would see 510. So don't worry about it. Just know that this is arithmetic, and this is how we're adding two numbers. So that's how we add. And I'm just going to duplicate this line because I want to show subtraction, multiplication, division, and then this one called modulus, right? So I'm just going to duplicate this console.write line by holding down Control and pressing D. So that's a nice quick way to duplicate your lines in Visual Studio. And then I'm just going to change this out. So this is subtraction. And then subtraction, it's the minus sign, right? So we're adding x plus y, and then we're subtracting x minus y. So anybody who understands basic mathematics, this should not be too, out of place for you to understand. So multiplication, we use the asterisk. We don't use the x. When we are writing it on paper, we use x, but as you can see, x is going to be seen as x. So if we want the operator that handles multiplication, we need to use the asterisk or the star, right? If we're doing division, then most if not all keyboards, and I'm just going to go out on a limb and say no keyboard has the division sign the way we write it on paper. So for division, you have to use your slash. So the same slash you use for the comments is the same slash that you use for division, but obviously you're using one of them, because if I use two, then that's going to start some commenting, right? So 1/ that is division. So this is saying that x or 5 is going to be divided by y or 10, all right? We do have modulus, and then modulus is the percentage sign. So this is basically a division, but then this modulus is going to return the remainder, right? So for instance, if I said 2 divided by 1, or you know what, let me actually change it out so I can, when we print it out to screen, you'll see exactly what I'm saying. So let's say this is 3 and this is 2, right? So when we say 3 divided by 2, we're going to get back 1 point something, right? That's the 1.5. That would be the decimal, right? But then if I said modulus, it's going to return 1 because 2 goes into 3 one time with a remainder of 1. All right. So that's the difference between the division and the modulus. The modulus returns the remainder of the division operation, and division, well, just tries to divide. So I'm going to pause right here, and then we're going to run this operation and see exactly what's happening. And so we usually go over here in our Solution Explorer, right-click our project and say set as startup project, but you've probably figured out the shorter way to do that by now, and that is by selecting from this drop-down list. So right beside the start button, there's a drop-down list with all the projects, and you can just say which one you want and then go ahead and press start. All right, so on screen, we're seeing the results of our arithmetic operation. So we assigned the value, that's the first one. And then addition is 5, because 3 plus 2 is 5. Subtraction is 1, multiplication is 6, division is 1, and modulus is 1. So because they're both returning 1, you're not really seeing the power of modulus. So I'm going to change this, and I'm going to switch these numbers around. So I'm going to use 3. And I'm going to use a value like 8. So at least we know that when we hit the modulus, we won't be seeing the same for the division and the same for the modulus. Well, actually, it will be. Sorry, my math slipped me a while ago. Let me try 11. So 11 divided by 3 is going to be 3 times, but then the modulus is expected to return 2 because that's the remainder from this division operation. So let's try that again. All right, so here we go. So we are getting different values because, well, once again, it's x and y, and whatever we put in as the values of x and y will influence the math being done. So 3 plus 11 is 14. 3 from 11, that is 8. Or if I'm to read it exactly how we wrote it, that's 11 minus 3 leaves 8. Multiplication, that is 11 times 3. Division, that is 11 divided by 3 is 3. So it goes into it 3 times. And notice it's returning just an int. All right. And then I say, give me the modulus. So it's returning how many, the remainder of the division operation of 11 and 3. Now, right now, we're adding two variables. What if we wanted to add a variable to the value it had in itself as well as another value? So for more context, I wanted to add whatever x is and add 4 more to it. So whatever value x has, I want to add 4 to it, and that should be the new value of x. So that means I would have to do something like x is now assigned the value, or x is equal to itself plus 4. Right? So I'm doing this after this operation. So 11 and 3, those are the values. And then the math will be done with the values of 11 and 3. But then I want to change the value of x to be 4 more than it was when it was first initialized, right? So now I'm adding 4 to whatever value x had. Because x is a variable, I don't know what it has at any point, so I have to retain it in the math. And then after that math is done, I assign it to itself. So that with that done, I'm just going to use this console right line, and then I'm going to say new value of x. And then I'm just printing x to the screen. And then just to prove that that gave it a new value, I'm going to reprint all of these addition operations, or sorry, all of these arithmetic operations using x, and then the expectation is that the values that the initial operations would have yielded should be different from these values after we've changed the value of x. So let's try that. So now we can take a look and we see that, okay, all of these values were the same as we saw last time, but then the new value of x is 15 because, like I said, we added 4 to whatever value x had, and then it will work out different math because the value of x is different. Notice the division is now 5 because 3 goes perfectly into 15 5 times and leaves no remainders. No, operations like this are done all the time. Most, you don't always know what value is there, so you just retain the variable and do whatever addition or subtraction, multiplication. It can be done with any other operator. So if I wanted to multiply the value of x by 4, then I just say x is equal to itself times 4, and then that's its new value. Now, because of that function, or the need to do that kind of function, we have what we call compound assignment. So instead of having to type out x is equal to x plus 4, then we can actually do something like x plus equals 5. So I'm just going to, 4. Since we're using 4, let me use 4 all the time. So I'm just going to copy this down here and show you that these two lines are saying the same thing. X plus equal 4 is the same thing as saying x is equal to x plus 4. And the same applies for any other operation that we would be carrying out. So if I wanted to say x should be equal to x times 5, right? So x's new value should be itself, whatever value it has at the time, times 5. Whatever this yields should be assigned to x. That's the same thing as saying, and I'll write the longer way in comments and show you the shorter way, x star equals 5. All right. So anytime we want to do that kind of operation where we're assigning the variable a new value based on what its value is already, then we can write it either way. We can write it as x is equal to x times 5, or we can say the variable, which is x in this case, that operator equal. I notice there's no space, there's no gap here. If you put a space there, you might get an error. So it is operator, assignment operator, and then the value, and then that will imply to C# that you're doing this operation. All right, so I just wrote out some examples of assignment operators. You can take some time and write these off. But what I'll be doing here is changing the value of x with each operation, just showing you that whatever the operation is with the arithmetic symbols, it can be used for the compound assignment and as long as you just have that operator and then the equal sign. So let's try it again. All right, so we have our first block where we did our assignment. It is, the value was 11, and then we did the operations 11 and the 3, I believe, yeah. And then we did the operations with the 3 and the 11, and then we changed the value of the x variable to 15, and then we did new operations. And then by the time we got down there, the value was still 15 because we didn't change the value again until I said x plus equals 5. So 15 plus 5 is 20. Then I said x minus equals 3, which means whatever value I have now, which is 20, I want it to be equal to that value minus 3. So my variable's value got set now to 17 because it was 20 minus 3, and that's the new value of x. Then we go on to say whatever the value of x is, I want to multiply it by 2. So I'm saying 17 times 2 is now 34. Then I say, okay, whatever value that has, make x now equal to that divided by 3. And 34 divided by 3 is pretty much 11. And then we went on to say, give me the modulus of 3 into 11. And then that gave us the 2. So that is how we handle compound assignments and arithmetic operations. Now, like I said, these are not all of the operators that are available to us in C#, and by extent, any other programming language, but this is a good place to start. And as we go along and look at if statements and for loops, we'll start seeing other operators used for other things.